Hello everyone and welcome to the special finale episode of Sins of the Father. Thank you for watching and thank you for joining me as I plough through the remaining 4 or 5 chapters and get this all wrapped up for you today. It's been a bit of a journey. Martha returned after about 13 years of absence to find her family in complete disarray. Her father had been murdered or killed in suspicious circumstances, and her mother was catatonic, and her sister was desperately seeking answers and had hired private investigators, paranormal investigators, to look into the death. And jumping into the investigation, Martha's allies have discovered some very disturbing things, some of which have panned out to be true, some of them haven't, and yeah, we're going to finally deal with all of the fallout for it. It's all going to come to a head, so please join me as we jump right back in. Chapter 25. Chapter 25. Martha had no idea what time it was when she eventually awoke the next day in Parker's home, in her bed. Even though it technically didn't belong to her, she was so warm and snug that she'd claimed it for her own and didn't want to leave it ever, or perhaps any time after that. Eventually she conceded defeat, peeled back the cover, yawning and stretching out her body. As she moved over to the edge of the bed, she noticed something sitting on her bedside table that hadn't been there before, a piece of paper which had been folded into a tent with her name written on the facing side. Somewhat intrigued, she reached over, bringing it into her lap and opening it up. It was from Parker, who apologised that he had to go to Empire to officially begin his next 24-hour shift, and stated that there was something for her in the kitchen. Giving in, she climbed out of bed and made her way down the hall, surprised to see a small pile of things patiently waiting for her on the breakfast bar. The first thing she came across was another note, also from Parker, which said that the small set of keys were for him so that she could let herself in and out of the apartment, and that the shoe-sized box postal package that had been left outside of the door with her name on it, he proposed, was from one of her very tall Nephilim friends. He signed off the note with a little kiss and suggested that she call him on the number that he'd written on the bottom of the page when she finally managed to wake up and get what he referred to as her gorgeous arse out of bed, which was cute, and as it turned out, to hint about one of the things that were inside of the package. Martha wasn't at all surprised that Parker had checked the contents of the box, given that the only people who knew she was staying with him were her sister and Walsh. He was looking out for her. What did surprise her was that Stefan, or somebody ordered by Stefan, had come into Marytown to leave her a gift during the night. However, it transpired that it was not a token of affection, nor an apology for how rude he'd been to her human friend the previous evening, but a box full of supplies that he had thought that she might need. Practical, efficient, and so very Stefan. She would forgive him. Included in the supplies was a mobile telephone, which she didn't need to switch on to know it would come preloaded with a number that she could contact her mentor on, should she need to. That he was resorting to using technology for them to keep in touch told her that he was either keeping tabs on her, or he was concerned that they might still might not be able to mentally communicate across the border. It was probably both. She wouldn't be surprised if it was chipped with a GPS tracker so he could locate her if he needed to. Also in the box was a small plastic debit card that had her name on it, from an account number she'd never used before, and another note that told her it had been set up for her so that she could buy any human essentials that she might need during her stay. The difference between the two notes was so stark that it made Martha shock her head, one so formal, the other so friendly. It was a jarring reminder of the major differences between the two worlds she duly inhabited. Bridging the cultural gap felt absurd, but if she was able to try, then Martha would do so. There had to be a way to bring balance to her life, and it seemed logical to start by doing what she came here to do. Switching on the phone, she waited until it booted up, and then punched in the number that Parker had left for her. It answered on the third ring, his tone so formal and inquiring it reminded her of how it had sounded over the intercom when she'd first arrived at Empire 2 nights earlier. She smiled and said, "Hello, it's me." "And she's awake," he responded, seeming rather amused by the something. "I was beginning to wonder when you'd call. Sleep well?" "You didn't need to leave me in bed all day." "I know. But you looked so peaceful and you needed the rest. I didn't want to disturb you. Wait, hang on." As she waited, Martha picked up... I'm so sorry I messed that up. As she waited, Martha picked through the remaining items in her care package, finding it quite remarkable that Stefan what Stefan considered to be essential supplies. In reality, it resembled a small survival kit, and the only thing she found of any real interest was the phone, debit card, and a small handgun. For while she didn't usually like firearms, and it would most likely remain stored away, it was nice to have one simply in case of emergencies. Better to have and not need it and all that. Sorry about that, Parker said, coming back on the line. Maxwell's in the office until 5. He's asked me to pass along his formal invitation for dinner tonight. He's getting rather desperate to meet you. Does a formal invitation mean I can't turn him down? She asked, though she'd been waiting for such a summons. Given all that she'd been doing with his staff since her arrival back in town, it was somewhat inevitable that the director would want to meet her, and maybe invoice her for the wrecked Empire vehicle. It means he wants to give you his welcome to Marytown speech, Parker said flippantly. In all seriousness, it'll make things a lot smoother going forward, and you'll be doing me a pretty big favour. Damn it. Her oldest, dearest friend was not above using emotional manipulation to get something that he wanted. And as she didn't want to deny him, she carefully broached. What about the summoning circle? Isn't that something we should be taking care of first? We will, he assured her. In fact, I've texted Walsh and Olivia and they're ready to meet us at the house when you are. We're going to get rid of that thing today. One way or another, it's time to put it to rest. Okay, she conceded. We'll do that, and then I'll come for dinner. Fantastic. She could almost hear him smile down the phone and felt like she'd done something right. I'll swing by now and pick you up. Can you get the talisman out the safe in the office? That's the first door off the lounge. You might as well put your little gift in there too while you're at it and make sure it's secure. Are you sure you don't mind me having it? She asked, knowing that there were a lot of people who didn't feel comfortable around firearms nor want them in their home. Parker had yet to be given that choice. Not a problem as long as you know what you're doing within it's stored correctly, he assured her. Safe code's your birthday. Oh, okay, thanks. With an awkward series of goodbyes and I'll see you soon, Martha hung up the phone and placed it back down on the breakfast bar, not knowing what to make about that last little piece of info. In many ways it freaked her out, but the pragmatist in her thought that it was a good number to pick, as few people would think of it. Or perhaps he'd just changed it that morning to something that she might know. Yeah, that must have been it. Brushing off her discomfort, she collected her gun and headed for the office, which in reality was a decent-sized square room that had a desk, computer, some filing cabinets, shelves, and the safe, which was in plain view, located underneath the shelves. She opened it up by punching in 1 and 8, and then 2 more 1s, and put the gun and ammunition boxes inside, retrieving the talisman that was back inside of its plastic evidence bag, all nice and safe, carrying it with her to her bedroom, along with the box of supplies. She stored her new toys in the bottom of her wardrobe, amongst the few pairs of shoes and bags that remained in her built-in closet at the Ford residence. It seemed like Amanda had packed up all of her big sister's belongings, making the correct assumption that she wouldn't want to go back to stay there, even after the corrupted magic in the house was neutralised. Clever girl. Martha was relieved. It meant that she had a base of belongings to restart her life in Marytown with, but she'd still need to go shopping, something that she didn't enjoy. But that was for another time. Her most immediate problem was figuring out if she had an outfit that was simultaneously suitable for killing a demon and going out for dinner with her best friend's boss. That she was more frightened about the latter event said a lot more about her than she cared to admit, but she'd never been a social butterfly. More like a timid hermit crab. Now, the other threat. That was something she knew exactly how to handle. And she'd be lying if she didn't admit that she was looking forward to seeing exactly what had killed Amanda's father. If she'd been wrong about the man that made her childhood misery, there was some vengeance to be extracted. And if she knew how to do anything, it was making evil bastards pay for their crimes. The question remained, who was eviler? A dangerous supernatural enemy? Or William Ford? Let me just have a quick drink. Nice cup of tea. Okie dokie, let's carry on. Chapter 26. Walking into the Ford house, Martha instantly regretted not coming back sooner. The feeling of corruption that she'd felt in the study had spread throughout the whole abandoned house, polluting the once populated family home with magic that had been left to rot. As Parker went in search of Walsh, who was doing a metaphysical sweep of the premises, Martha went upstairs to the study, finding Olivia inside. The blonde pagan was setting up for her afternoon's work, placing white candles and earthy-smelling herb bundles in arching barriers around the top and base of the circle, directly around which she'd placed another array of white candles, intersected by a ring of what looked like rock salt. Martha offered her an awkward greeting before asking if it was safe to enter. which the woman nodded, warning her to keep out of the magical area that she'd created in the middle of the room. Moving around the edge of the area, Martha took position in front of the tall, wide canvas at the back. She watched Olivia work with a keen amount of fascination, still not understanding the process, but finding it intriguing nonetheless. The pagan was wearing shiny black trousers that were skin tight underneath a long and sheer scarlet and yellow short-sleeved blouse, and heeled black boots that came up to her knees. Her blonde locks were pinned back from her face, which was starkly beautiful, done up with an expert touch of makeup that would have been too subtle for a photographer's camera, but a little bit much for a ritualistic demon cleanse, making Martha wonder if she too were invited to join them and her father for dinner once things had gotten wrapped up there. It seemed logical, but it did nothing to quell her nerves. Olivia got to her feet and stared down at her work. From what little Martha knew about magic, it appeared very oppressive, but she didn't look happy, which encouraged Martha to ask if there was something wrong with the method that she'd chosen to adopt. The magical expert assured her, "No, we're pretty much set. I just wish I knew exactly what we were summoning. I feel like I'm blind and there's nothing I hate more than being unprepared." "I might be able to help with that," Martha stated. "The last time I was here I found the circle. I sensed something in those books that I told you about, but there was something else, something I completely forgot about. It might have been important." Turning around, she looked at the 3 canvases behind her, indicating the middle painting, which was a wide oil painting depicting a group of approximately 20 men and women frolicking on what appeared to be a stormy, battered coastline. They were in various states of undress, curvaceous women with flowing vestments dancing around their upper thighs, others with their breasts on display, and tall, muscular men with their modesties barely covered by loins of cloth and dark intent in their eyes. Trees in the background swayed in the storm, matching the cavorting mid-dance poses of the crowd. Impressive, but like so many other dated paintings that Martha had ever laid her eyes upon, it was just art. Surely it told a story, but she couldn't bring herself to care what, even though she thought she probably ought. She told Olivia, "I can't explain it, but when I first found the circle, I did so by essentially following the threads of energy that were in the room at the time. They went from the books to here before going to the middle of the room where the circle was drawn. It might be nothing, but this might hold some significance." Olivia came to stand next to her, pursing her lips in sceptical concentration as she regarded the painting. William Ford summoned a demon so he could engage in some kind of mythical orgy? Stranger things have happened, Martha said, but she agreed that the notion was extreme. The man who raised her was not that frivolous. "Well, I'm happy if you want to try and do a reading of it before we get started, but hold off until everybody's here." And she crossed the room, heading to a long black holdall that she placed by the door, and retrieved something from a side pocket, bringing it back to Martha and holding it up. "Also put this on, please." Dangling from her hand was a thin silver chain with a simple disc-like pendant that had a pretty curvy 5-sided star carved out of the recess in the middle of it. A little bit wary, Martha accepted it, but didn't immediately put it on, causing Olivia to politely clarify, "It's just a protective amulet that I blessed for you. I want you to wear it." "Okay," she said, carefully undoing the clasp and fixing it around her neck so that it dangled down her front. "Thank you." "Not a problem," Olivia smiled, and it seemed so genuine that Martha felt bad. Given what she now knew about the blonde pagan's relationship with the man that they'd both loved and lost, she sensed that there needed to be a conversation. Something in the air that needed to be cleansed so that any possible underlying tension vanished. "Olivia," she nervously started, "I think we need to—" "No," the other woman interrupted. "We don't need to do that." "We don't?" "Look, Martha," she explained, "I'm not the kind of girl that gets into it with another woman over a man. As far as I'm concerned, I can't think of anything trashier. We're working together. I like you, and I think you're great at what you do. Nothing else should matter." "No, it shouldn't," Martha agreed. "You need some kind of assurance that I'm not going to cause trouble or resent you if you and Parker decide that you're testing things out. I understand that. You won't find any confrontation here, really. I'm the last person that you need to worry about." "I appreciate that, Olivia. And we're not, at least we haven't." A slender hand wafted the floundering, awkward conversation away. A little bit firmer, Olivia stated, "I don't need to know that." "Okay then. Fantastic," she concluded with another genuine smile. "Now, should we get the boys in here so that we can do this? I'm starving, and there's a chicken scarapello with my name on it. I can't pronounce that. When my husband read this book, he was like you even know what that is. I do. It's an Italian chicken dish. It's delicious. Olivia loves it. Okay, let me just take a quick drink before we move on. Oh. It's going off the rails quickly. Chapter 27. Given that the stakes were much higher than when she touched the talisman the night before, Martha didn't feel confident going through that again in the confines of William Ford's study, at least not on her own. It took some persuasion to convince Walsh to even step into the room, let alone accept her proposal that they work together. He had as much experience combining psychic abilities with another person as she did, but conceded that it was not only possible but the best option they had to finally find out what had happened the night that his girlfriend's father had been killed. For Amanda's sake, he agreed, nothing more. Parker sealed the door behind him, locking them all inside of the room. Olivia put down a line of salt along the threshold, and the still broken window to essentially seal in any energy that they might conjure up. She was so thorough and conscientious, all qualities that made Martha respect her even more. She was glad that Empire had somebody that was so dedicated to their craft on their rota. Standing next to Walsh, Martha should have felt intimidated and nervous. Dropping metaphysical defences around any other psychic was always going to contain a fair amount of risk, leaving them both vulnerable to psychic attack or unforeseen clashings of power. They both thought the risk in this instant was potentially worth the reward, and they'd already sized each other up before and deemed each other powerful but not a threat. She barely knew the young psychic that was dating her sister, but she trusted him. It was enough, and it had to be. The process was not all that more complicated than her touch reading. All of the basics would be the same, they just needed to be in physical contact with both of their defences down before laying their hands upon the canvas. It was determined always right away that they should do a trial run to make sure that they didn't accidentally kill each other before going for the painting, which also should have made Martha nervous, but she understood the need for caution. She took the lead and dropped her defences first, allowing her energy to rise into a layer just above her skin. When she was ready, she nodded and waited for Walsh to do the same, trying to not be afraid. With her senses so keen, she felt the exact moment that he let his power run free, unleashed. If her energy was like a balmy summer day, then Joe Walsh's power was the dry, raging heat of a wildfire. He was so powerful, and it was raw, untamed. It rushed straight for her as if it wanted to engage her power, but it was not an aggression, just rampant curiosity. Just as deadly if not controlled, but she knew that the young psychic was smart enough to keep it loosely leashed. He knew his strength, and he wasn't about to let his energy hurt her. The trust that she had placed in him had been rewarded. "Okay," Walsh said, assuring the rest of the people in the room that things were fine, safe to proceed. "Should we—" He held out a hand, and Martha took it. Their powers ran along the lines of their arms and met in the middle, flaring and crackling as they intertwined their fingers, mingling like fiery whips Martha was convinced would lash out and attack anybody that tried to come between them in that moment. "Are you ready?" she asked. He nodded. At the same time they reached out for the painting. Flat hands pressed to the canvas, their unified power flared and rushed through both sides of their bodies, down their arms and into the intricate brushstrokes, seeking out information that would help their cause. When it found what it was looking for, it didn't move them both into a vision, like what had happened to Martha in the early hours. Instead, the power cast itself out into the room, transforming it with an ethereal shimmer that blended the past with the present, the real with the metaphysical, until the whole room became a staging for the memory that it wanted to share. "Holy crap," Olivia marvelled from behind them. "I can see it." Martha briefly had a thought whether that was a good thing, because it meant there would be an impartial witness. But then suddenly the ghostly figure of a man was standing in front of her and Walsh, gazing longingly at the painting, and the sight made her gasp. For it had been a very long time since she'd laid eyes upon the man that had so appallingly dragged her through her childhood years, and she couldn't believe how much he had aged, how dejected was his stance, and how small he appeared. Not a monster, but a man. An elderly, sad man, and it was almost pitiful. Wearing the smart suit ensemble that his body had been dressed in the crime photos that she'd seen, William Ford looked dishevelled, but still oddly debonair. In his shaking, aging hands he held the talisman that he'd been given, blessed by a practitioner who later died in truly horrific circumstances. Martha wondered if he knew of the death, if it weighed heavy on his conscience. She also wondered how someone so physically unimposing could have been the cause of so many years of angst. Now he would be a joke to her. She could kill him in 1,000 different ways and he would never harm her again. Strange how time away gave you a whole new perspective. The ethereal memory of William Ford sighed deep and then put the talisman around his neck. He moved slowly as if he were tired as he walked around the summoning circle, speaking words that she'd never heard before, and she became vaguely aware of Olivia standing in the background, still in the mortal plane, listening intently to the incantation that was being used, and of Parker standing by the door, not part of things but alert for danger nonetheless. There was suddenly a crackling of power, a heaviness filling the space in the middle of the room where the summoning circle had been drawn. What appeared was blurry, misshapen, like a corrupted image on a television screen. Martha couldn't make it out, no matter how hard she concentrated and willed it into clarity, a real image. She could, however, hear a voice, disjointed but filled with disdain as it asked the mortal man what he wanted, lambasting him for his ignorance and mocking his lack of true magical power. "You know what I want, you monster," Mr. Ford bellowed back at the presence in the image, full of bravado. "Show her to me." The voice cackled, feigned ignorance, told him he was unworthy. "Oh, pish," the man scoffed, a turn of phrase Martha had heard many times as she was growing up. "You're the one, aren't you? You have what I seek. I demand that you give her to me." The owner of the voice seemed to hesitate, then changed tactics, adopting a more persuasive tone as it asked the man what he would offer in exchange. Martha saw the disdain on the summoner's face, knew that he had no intentions of playing the game the way that it was meant to be played, and for the first time she felt afraid, because she knew why he'd been killed. "I don't think so, you fiend," the spectre of William Ford yelled into the ether. "This is not how this is going to work. You'll give me what I want. Tell me where she is, now." The voice laughed at his incompetence once more, declined, and then bid him goodbye, disappearing from the circle. "No," Mr. Ford beseeched, finally in subjugation, afraid of the loss. "Please, give me what I asked for. I'm sorry for my arrogance. I just want to make it right, fix my mistakes. Please, I beg of you." The presence returned, lingered, as if deliberately being stubborn, but in truth it simply liked to hear the human before it beg and plead. It was a ploy. It was all an evil ploy that was about to fall into reality. "Please," the man said again. "Please, give me my daughter back." The demon relented, feigned understanding for the human's obvious grief. It swore that it would help him, but claimed that it needed something in return, something worthy. Mr. Ford conceded with a defeated nod. The demon laughed softly, asked if he approached the circle so that he could give him exactly what he deserved, the price for making everything right, what it would cost him to fix his mistakes. Martha silently begged the man that she hated for so long not to listen. William Ford did precisely what the demon asked of him, however, moving solemnly to the circle, afraid but with hope in his wrinkled blue eyes. Oh, he was such a fool. Martha braced herself for what she knew had to be coming next. The demon struck, its victim caught unaware, lunging forwards out of an inadequately protected magic circle. It gripped the man by the front of his shirt, tossed him across the room where his elderly body slammed into a table full of books, the same books Martha had noticed, returned to their original placing. It didn't relent, however, clasping him again and throwing him to the other side of the room, this time into the art that was standing on easels back there, where Walsh and Martha stood, touching canvas in the real world, a pair of horrified witnesses to the violence. Martha fought the overwhelming urge to break the contact and rush to the man's aid, but deep down she knew that she couldn't. You can't change what has happened in the past. You can watch it unfold, but you can never intervene, even when it was the vicious assault of a close family member unfolding before your eyes. There was absolutely nothing that she could do, and it crushed her. The demon picked William Ford up, bringing him back to the middle of the room. The man was hurt, but he was still alive. He begged for forgiveness, pleaded for his life. It was not enough. It would never have been enough. For he'd angered a monster, and true monsters don't care about forgiveness. They can only destroy you. The monster laughed in his face, told him that the world was going to be much better off without him, and with one last show of force threw him across the room and out of the balconied window, which shattered against a sudden impact, parting ways and allowing the human man that had been flung against them to plummet to what they all knew back on the mortal plane was ultimately his death. Walsh pulled back from the canvas first. Martha stood there for a long time, frozen in shock, before removing her hand from the painting too. She didn't sense the power that had filled the room ebb away into nothing, nor did she notice that she was now standing there alone, until a thought occurred to her, and she suddenly snapped out of her daze, stepped around the third canvas to the back of the painting, searching for something that she remembered being on the back of all of the artwork that had ever come into William Ford's possession. When she found it, she sighed heavily and shook her head, crestfallen, heartbroken for the man who'd been killed. Walsh followed her. With a fine layer of concern in his voice, he asked her what she was looking for. She pointed to the white printed inventory label that had been stuck to the rear of the frame. It denoted a lot of important information about the artwork, but most importantly it listed the name of the painting. The young psychic read it and he immediately understood. William Ford hadn't been talking about Amanda when he beseeched the monster who'd sent him to his death. When he had pleaded for his daughter to be returned so that he could make amends for his mistake, he had not been talking about his biological child. He'd been talking about Martha. The painting, which had a sadly apt name, had been another clue. The sons of God saw the daughters of men. No wonder he'd looked so forlorn. Heading back around the paintings, Martha locked eyes with Olivia, who seemed to be lost somewhere amidst shock and sadness. With a steely, frightening determination, she asked the beautiful pagan, "Do you have what you need for the summoning?" She nodded. Yeah, I know exactly what to do." "Good," she retorted, filled with bitterness. "Because I want him. Here. Now. I need to look that bastard in the eye while I kill him." "I think I might be able to help you with that too," Olivia said, crossing the room to the same long bag that she'd retrieved the pretty amulet from and opening up the main compartment. What she pulled out surprised and impressed Martha. A sword, long and gleaming silver with ancient runes carved into the blade and a simple black hilt. Impressive, sharp, deadly, perfect. Olivia held it out to her, presenting it in a way that denoted what an honour she felt it would be to have Martha's approval. "It was anointed by a powerful shaman that I used to know back home. He claimed that he'd killed many demons with it." Martha reached out, tentatively checking. "May I?" "Absolutely," she nodded emphatically. "I get the impression you'll be a lot better at wielding it than I would. Please, take it." On that assumption, Martha couldn't comment. For all she knew, Empire's resident magic user was a great fighter and had swung a blade many times. However, on that particular night, she wanted to be the one to avenge the man who had died, because he'd wanted to make amends for the life that he'd led and the daughter that he'd spurned. She needed to do this killing, to be his avenger. The anointed sword felt good and weighty in her grip. Stepping back to give herself enough room, she gave it a couple of swings. It would do, very nicely. She had a weapon, and all she needed was a demon. It was finally time to end this, for her sister, for her mother, and for the man who she'd hated for so very long, for all the awful things that he had done as a result of his inability to accept Martha for who she was, for all the sacrifices that had been made and the pain that she'd been forced to endure throughout her formative years and after, when her life had taken an abrupt turn that it had, and she'd started her long, hard journey down the road which led her to becoming who she was today. William Ford had died for her, for Martha. She would kill for him. After all, where she now lived, that was what family meant. In it together, to the end, for bloodier and worse. Whew. It's quite intense. Yeah. It's been a very long while since I read that back, and I was feeling it. I was feeling it. Oof. Chapter 28. It didn't take long for Olivia to adjust her original setup and be ready to summon the demon that had killed William Ford. Martha paced the room with nervous energy, not because she feared the encounter to come, but that she feared that it might not come at all. She needed to do this. Now. Right now. With the study secure and all of the magical elements set, she warned Parker and Walsh to be ready, and nodded to Olivia, who had taken centre stage in front of the summoning circle. The cracks of light from the broken window lit her up like she was on the stage as she spoke. "I'm not going to repeat the exact incantations that your father did." She informed Martha as if she wanted her to know the method. "Instead, I'm going to invoke it, make it believe that I'm its pawn and I wish to worship it. The words have been carefully selected, and if it chooses to not heal my call, it will be banished from the property. Either way, this will be over, but I'm confident that it will feel compelled to show its face." Martha nodded. "Do it." Standing before the circle, Olivia took a deep breath and put the talisman that William Ford had used around her own neck. Martha found that an odd decision to make, but supposed that she wanted to honour the fallen magical practitioner who'd blessed it by using the remaining energy to right the wrong that had clearly been caused. In a clear, commanding voice, the practising pagan spoke out into the ether. "Of the sky and of the ground, may you cast your divine energy down. Until the light and unto the dark, old spirit, descend to heed my heart. Hear my pleas and come forth from the night. I give you the portal to ascend to the light. I invoke thee, giver of wishes, taker of souls, bless me with your presence, or be here no more." Martha waited, expecting something to happen immediately. It did not. The magical energy that filled the room swirled but didn't change, nor did it dissipate, as she supposed it might have done if Olivia's call had been rejected and the demon cast out. The pagan didn't give up, though, trying again and again. Something was definitely happening, but Martha couldn't tell exactly what. From a novice outside perspective, it appeared to be a battle of wills, as if the demon was listening, but wasn't sure whether it or not it believed that Olivia was worthy of its attention. Perhaps it sensed an ambush. Perhaps it was simply bored and wanted to play. The invocation went on for so long that Martha began to give up hope of the encounter, which made her angry. However, Olivia instinctively seemed to know what to do. Leaving her spot, she walked around the entirety of the summoning circle before yanking the talisman from her neck so hard that the chain bit into her skin before it broke. Blood pooled upon the edge of her throat. She reached in through the magical barrier and dropped the trinket into the middle of the circle, muttering and clearly peeved, "Oh, take it then, you goddamn fickle son of a bitch." No sooner did the gold artifact hit the ground than the space was filled by a presence. A man. A slender, ineffectual and ultimately disappointing flesh and blood man in a royal blue pressed suit and a red tie. On the surface the monster appeared utterly unimposing, but Martha wasn't about to be swayed into underestimating him. Not when she just witnessed him toss around her stepfather like a doll. Demons often lost their intimidating natural forms when they came into the mortal plane. They instead became what their human slaves wanted to see of them, so they could exact the most influence over them. Ultimately, it was costume dressing, and nothing more. This was a monster, and Martha killed his kind. It took every bit of patience that she had within her not to strike immediately. The demon looked upon Olivia as if he found her exceptional, which was accurate praise because she was in beauty and talent. His voice was smooth and lilting, almost mesmerising as he spoke to her. "My mother was actually a very wonderful woman, but since I'm suddenly feeling in a very generous mood, I'll let that insult slide and allow you to worship me, you magnificent creature. I thank you for your small token. I've always been very fond of gold." "You can keep it," she smirked. "Wasn't mine to begin with." "No," he agreed, sounding impressed. The essence of a dead witch, and so very naughty that one was too. Such wicked sins she committed in her mortal life. "I'm most touched, my little buttercup, but this is not why you summoned me. Shall we parley?" "Oh, but should I be so worthy of such a thing?" Olivia lamented with a shake of her head and a hand upon her heart, seeming to all intents and purposes to be genuinely meek. "Sadly, I am but a go-between. There's somebody else, someone much more important than I here, who wishes to make your acquaintance, I'm afraid." "There is," he sounded coquettish, as if he were enjoying their game. Martha was utterly convinced that he was aware of her presence as she was of his. A demon of this calibre would not be an unwary fool. "There is," Olivia repeated, his own words back to him, before smiling, rather wickedly. "Walsh, are you ready back there?" Before the demon could react to her swift change in demeanour, a backdraft of red-hot psychic energy flowed through the room, capturing the monster in its wake and lifting it up off its expensive shoes, leaving it dangling in the air like a jostled rag doll. Pathetic. Martha turned her head to admire the young psychic in action, stood on the opposite side of the circle as Olivia embraced legs, focusing hard on maintaining the binding that he'd cast out. It didn't surprise Martha in the slightest that Walsh knew and could wield magic. His power was too strong to be only mystical. The demon, however, was not impressed. He glared at Olivia with the look of a scorned lover might give to somebody who'd just stomped all over their heart. His voice was thin and full of spite, and he spat in her direction. "Oh, you are in so much trouble now, Buttercup." Well, maybe if you're lucky I'll let you spank me." "I'm going to do much more than that," he warned, in strained aggression. "You'll be my new pet. I look forward to breaking that spirit of yours. Your friend can't hold me here forever." "He's not meant to," Olivia stated, clearly enjoying her position of power over the fiend. "Just long enough for my other friend to have her say. She's been dying to meet you." "Oh, right, and where is this most important person, then?" "I'm right here," Martha said, stepping around the circle so that she took the place that Olivia had been standing in. The blonde pagan took a step back behind her shoulder, staying close enough to assist if needed, but allowing Martha to lead the show now. The demon cocked his head in surprising appraisal. "Nephilim?" "Martha." He laughed in a sing-song voice. "You're not meant to be here." "Neither are you," she pointed out. "The only difference is that this is my home, or it was, and the man that you killed raised me here. He was part of my family. He wasn't a saint, I know that, but he was a good father to my sister, and he was devoted to my mother in his own way. He didn't deserve to die by your hand, demon." "Do you even know what he did?" the monster taunted. "Yes, he upset you. He summoned you, and then he treated you with disrespect, and so you decided to make an example out of him." "He disrespected me. That sad, sick old man thought he was in charge, so I gave him what he wanted. He didn't want to die." "No, I don't suppose he did," the demon chuckled. "But what was I meant to do? Let him go? Let all of the little humans scurry around making their demands, thinking they can bully and have whatever they want without consequences? There have been rules of engagement between us for as far back as time began for a reason, little Nephilim. And that man attempted to strong-arm me into serving him." He let out a noise of utter disgust, shaking off the indignation that he felt from her challenging his methods. "He summoned a demon. He got exactly what he wanted, exactly what he deserved." "No, he wanted me," Martha argued. "He wanted you to tell him where I was, or better yet, give me to him so he could make amends for what he'd done to me, so that my mother would love him again." Is that really what you think?" the demon asked, face brimming with curiosity. "That he was sorry for everything that he did to you? I saw it with my own eyes. I know what he wanted." The demon stared at her for a long moment before bursting into a barrage of laughter so hard that Martha could swear she saw tears forming in his eyes. Either he was a complete lunatic, or he was deliberately goading her. She wasn't sure which was worse. Seething, she asked, "And how the hell is that funny to you?" "You," he replied, quelling the laughter with a jovial breath. "Little girl lost, going to extremes of summoning me in order to seek revenge for a man who hated her, and wished that she died before she was even born, so she can feel better about her shitty human life and all that followed after it ended. God, you're so overdramatic." "And you're gonna die tonight," Martha retorted, with absolute certainty. "So why don't you tell me what it is you think I don't know about William Ford before I see you ended?" The demon chuckled. "He hated you. Oh, how he hated you." Martha bristled. "Tell me something I don't know." "He wanted me to grant him access to you, sure, but he didn't want to make amends. Oh no. At least not with you, silly little girl. He wanted your mother to forgive him for losing you. The only way he thought that he could do that was by getting you back. That much is also correct. But he didn't want you, little Nephilim, no. He didn't want a daughter who was a freak, who reminded him with her physical appearance alone that the woman he loved betrayed him every single day with her heart. He wanted a daughter that would be obedient, a good little girl like the other one was. Like how you should have always been. Do you understand now, child? Not really, she said, shaking her head. Clearly frustrated, the demon yelled, he wanted to rob you of your dirty little Nephilim powers and take them for himself. Martha shook her head. You lie. And you're an ignorant fool. Better a fool than a demonic piece of shit in a cheap suit. The demon's eyes widened in angry defiance. He stated with outright clarity, I don't like you, little girl. I'm going to take that blade you have in your hand and I'm going to hold you down and take a blood oath with you from it, making you mine. And then when you're all nice and compliant, I'll have you kill all your friends, human and Nephilim alike. Apart from Buttercup here, of course, I'm keeping her. We have so much potential together. Martha sensed Olivia stiffen behind her in fear, which made the demon smirk, so very full of himself. Then, when your mind is broken from all that delicious mental torment, I'm going to metaphysically turn you inside out until you choke on your own disgusting humanity and your ugly murdering soul. And then I'm going to laugh the whole time. It was a nicely horrific graphical image, but Martha held her ground and knowingly countered. No, you won't. The demon was absolutely incredulous. Excuse me? You're not powerful enough to even do one of those things to me. He bristled. Get your friend to release me, and we'll see how powerful I am. See, Martha pointed out, laughing more than a little bit arrogantly herself. You can't even overpower a silly little human, one who, while impressive, really isn't as magically gifted as he thinks he is. Face it, demon. If you had any true powers, I would have known that you were in town long before now, because I'd have sensed you here, and my friends on the hill would have hunted you down and torn you from gangly limb. You're nothing. You're a pawn. I'm your worst nightmare, he retorted. You have no idea. She shook her head. Sorry, not buying it. You're a pathetic bully of a demon whose time is up, and I'm done talking with you. Letting her defences slip ever so slightly to the side, Martha deliberately turned her back on the demon, waiting, hoping that his arrogance would make him do exactly what she expected him to do. And he took the bait. Of course he did. Lesser demons always thought they had a much bigger roles to play in the grand scheme of things than they actually did. It would have been laughable, only Martha barely had time to react before the fiend defiantly cast aside Walsh's powerful binding spell and launched himself in her direction. She turned as he landed on top of her, slamming her back down onto the hardwood floor. Somewhat winded, the sword fell from her hand. The demon simultaneously pinned her down while fighting off the people that came running to her aid, seemingly having more than two limbs and knowledge of how to use them rather effectively. But it was never going to be enough to save them. Martha smiled up into his face and said, "Get the hell off me, you piece of shit," before rolling back and using both of her legs to power to counter the assault. The demon flew forwards, in the exact same direction as he'd launched the man that he'd killed. There was a loud crash as the long windows once again gave way, but Martha didn't lie there and wait. It took more than a fall to kill a demon, and he would certainly survive that small manoeuvre. She knew that she had to keep on him. Scrambling to her feet and following his direction, she launched herself over the stone balcony rail and down onto the gravel driveway where the body of her sister's father once lay, landing perfectly with bent knees and a determination to make the kill. She was on top of the demon before he seemed to realise that he'd even been thrown from the building, straddling his waist and raining blow after blow after blow down on his smug demonic face with her clenched fist. So much anger, so much rage filled her, and she unleashed it all on the demon that she was beating the living hell out of. This thing had broken her sister's heart, deprived her mother of a husband that she loved, and in spite of his many flaws. This thing deserved each and every single bit of pain that she could make it feel before she granted it a well-deserved death. Nobody hurt her family and got away with it. Nobody came into their home and corrupted it. Nobody. She became vaguely aware that someone was chanting an incantation behind her, something about wrath and fire and thunder and heaven, but all she could feel was rage. Somebody else yelled her name and she stopped and turned her head long enough to see Parker in the front doorway of the house. He didn't try to stop her from decimating the demon on the driveway. Simply throwing the anointed sword in her direction, which she expertly caught. Getting to her feet, she stood over the demon that had wreaked so much misery upon the people that she dearly loved. It was no longer conscious, its face beaten to a bloody, unrecognisable pulp. From her perch on the balcony in the study above, Olivia yelled down, "Martha, end it, now!" Martha lifted the sword over her head with both hands and swung. As the demon-killing weapon added another notch upon its runic blade, she heard the blonde pagan finish the exorcism ritual with an emphatic "Verdun cum silento e nocte." You son of a bitch. Boom. Demon dead. I like reading action scenes because you can quite easily get quite into them, but I do feel it. It gets quite intense. We are not quite finished yet. Chapter 29. By the time Martha and Parker arrived at the restaurant, they were late for dinner. Beating a lesser demon to death with her bare hands was as messy a task as it sounded, and she had needed to go home and shower and change so that she didn't freak out her fellow diners by wearing a smattering of demon brain as jewellery. The director of the Marytown Paranormal Investigation Agency was keen to meet her, but she figured it'd be better to go gore-free and be late than punctual and bloody as hell. It was the least that she could do. Stefan arrived shortly after the beheading and ordered his brother Isaac to clear the demon's corpse off the driveway, and Olivia performed a cleansing spell to make sure that there were no paranormal nasties could creep back into the Ford residence and set up home there while it was empty. Martha had taken great pleasure in grabbing a large axe from the anteroom by the back door where the garden tools had always been stored, and smashing the hardwood floor where the summoning circle was formed upon into hefty splinters, uncovering what had been buried below it. A small box of personal memories which would focus the intent of the magic used for the summoning. There was a picture of Martha as a child inside of the box. In it she was about 5 years old, before her abilities became so powerful that they could no longer pretend that she was normal, and William Ford could no longer convince himself that she was biologically his child. For a long time she sat there and stared at it, trying and failing to convince herself that the demon had been lying to her, that what she'd witnessed in the vision was accurate, that in the end her stepfather had truly wanted to atone for his sins, that he wanted to make amends, to be the man that he ought to have been. In the end she wrenched herself free from her brooding with the decision that whatever the truth was, it no longer mattered. William Ford was gone. The monster who killed him, slain. She'd done everything that she could. Now it was time to heal. Giorgio's Bistro was one of the nicest places to eat in Marytown, expensive enough to keep the clientele good, but not too extortionate that you have to take out a small loan to pay for your starter. Martha had never eaten there before. I wouldn't normally consider herself to be a sociable person, but she found herself looking forward to it as she got dressed up after showering off the bits of dead demon that she'd gotten on herself. After the events of the afternoon, she felt like she deserved a night of feasting and camaraderie, maybe even some wine, perhaps a whole bottle. Peter Maxwell, Olivia, Walsh and Amanda were already at the table when they arrived. The man in charge stood up to greet them. Maxwell was handsome in the way that old movie stars were handsome, with a debonair charm that didn't surprise Martha at all given the small amount of time that she'd spent with his daughter. He was wearing a smart business suit that fit him like it was custom made, as he was much too broad through the shoulders to have ever been able to buy a jacket that fit him so perfectly off the rack. Excuse me a moment. Sorry. He took Parker's hand and the two of them exchanged a few words about the investigation being finished up. Martha couldn't mistake the genuine affection and mutual respect that the two men held for each other as they embraced. It went deeper than a professional relationship, and had probably existed long before the younger man had gone and married the older man's daughter. They'd known each other for years through Maxwell's friendship with Parker's parents, and clearly thought a lot of each other. Martha Valentine, the man greeted her by name, holding onto her hand for a fraction longer than seemed professional, which he attributed to the less than formal setting. "I'm so sorry we haven't had the chance to meet sooner. You've been very busy, it appears, and I didn't wish to distract you from your mission." Yes, she said, intrigued by his choice of phrasing. I'm sorry I took over your team's investigation. That was not my intention, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. Oh, it's quite all right, he said. Please sit down. Martha took an empty chair next to her sister, whose hand immediately she gave a gentle squeeze, silently asking her if she was all right. Amanda nodded and smiled, mouthing a quiet thank you in response, which made Martha feel like she'd just saved the whole world rather than just simply slayed a minor demon. Parker sat between her and Olivia, who had taken her father's right-hand side. Walsh occupied the seat between his boss and his girlfriend, undoubtedly the only person in the entire restaurant to be able to get away with being dressed in jeans and a t-shirt. This one had a group image of Mickey Mouse and his fellow compatriots with the "in" crowd written above in an arch above their heads. Quite fitting. A waitress came by almost instantly to take their orders, having waited so long for the remainder of the party to arrive that she seemed to be chomping at the bit to do her job and earn some tips. Swayed by Olivia's not-so-subtle encouragement, Martha ordered the chicken scarpello. Parker seemed to be a little bit disturbed by how well the two of them had been getting along since Martha had killed the demon, but then he went ahead and ordered a dish called a filetto al senape, which essentially is filleted steak in an Italian restaurant, so she didn't feel like she was the one who'd committed a mortal sin. My Italian sucks, sorry. Once they were left alone with drinks and everything they could desire, Peter Maxwell opened up a conversation by formally offering Amanda the best wishes of the Empire team and welcoming Martha back to Marytown. Finally admitting, I have to confess, Miss Valentine, I have an ulterior motive for bringing you together with everybody here tonight. I hope you don't mind. Martha had expected as much. Instead of saying so, however, she casually asked, Really? What's your hidden motive? As I'm sure you're painfully aware, Marytown is not like other places, he said. It has a legacy that predates the construction of the town, which has heavy occult leanings, but it's more than that. The problem we have here is not ancient history, and we at the Marytown Paranormal Investigation Agency endeavour to maintain a balance that hangs on a knife edge. We do our utmost to prevent paranormal threats and entities from affecting the lives of normal, innocent civilians who live there, protect them from harm. You seem to be doing a grand job, she honestly complimented him, having seen a lot of impressive work and dedication from the Empire team. As personal as this particular investigation had been, she doubted they were anything but fully committed to their cause, which was very noble, if perhaps a losing battle. Refraining from sharing that view with Peter Maxwell, however, she politely added, I'm impressed with what I've seen so far. You're all remarkable. I felt honoured to work with Empire. Thank you for your kind words, he cordially replied. It's not easy. I set Empire up almost 30 years ago when I uncovered the real reason why the town is as troubled as it is. I think you know what I refer to when I say that, Miss Valentine. I'm sorry, she said, keeping a straight face. I'm not sure that I do. Miss Valentine, Martha. You should know that you don't have to play coy with me. The reason I possess the knowledge about Marytown that I already do is mostly because I am and have been longly acquainted with your father. Were, she corrected. My father's dead. That's why we're all here. I refer to your real father, he smiled in her response. Gadriel. Of all the personal bombshells that had fallen since her return to Marytown, that was the one that Martha had least expected to come up in a casual dinner conversation. She stared down at the table, partly because she didn't know how to handle the surprise in the eyes of her sister and her oldest friend, who, for all of their insights into her life and her past, hadn't known the truth of her heritage. She briefly wondered if Maxwell was trying to bluff her into letting something slip, but had to admit her real father's name was not something that the average person would come across easily. He knew who she was, where she come from. He had to know. Okay, she hedged. Say I believe you when you say that you're somehow acquainted with Gadriel. What does that have to do with me, with Marytown and Empire? Maxwell smiled as if he hadn't expected her to simply hold up her hands and surrender anything that she might have known or not been telling. One thing that she was beginning to learn was that Peter Maxwell was a shrewd man. Having dinner with him was apparently was like taking part in a game of chess with a master who'd been born with a multitude of strategies imprinted into his mind. As informed as she was, she simply wasn't that professional. He asked, have you heard of the Blackthorn Rose estate? It's a private school, she said, just outside of Blackthorn. That's correct. It's also the estate in which Edward Blackthorn once resided with his family, following his marriage to his beloved wife, Mary. I attended Blackthorn Rose as a student. The story of the Blackthorns utterly fascinated me, yet I never understood how such a prosperous family with an intriguing legacy vanished so suddenly and almost without a trace. I spent many years devoting myself to the mystery, studied everything I could find on them, and some things just didn't add up to me. I could almost see the lies hiding between the truths, but I could never quite put my finger on what they were. That sounds frustrating. Indeed it was, he confessed. Fortunately for me, I eventually found something of note. A journal that was written by a maid who served the family in the days of Arthur Blackthorn, right up to the creation of the town and beyond it. She spent her entire life in service to that family. She was loyal, and she was very observant. What did the diary say? Martha asked, genuinely fascinated. Too much to go into for one evening, he said, but it led me down some fresh avenues of inquiry. I thought I was about to find the truth when a strange man approached me, asking me about my interest in the Blackthorns and offering me a chance to learn about what happened to them. I was dubious, of course, but I had no idea how deep the corruption ran. I couldn't ignore the opportunity. Martha offered the assumption that man was Gadriel. No, Maxwell shook his head sadly. It was not. The man who accosted me was a servant, a demon that had been enslaved to a human that had been enslaved to the demon and only cared about doing their master's bidding. You fell into a trap. I did, he admitted humbly, and the servant hurt me very badly for my mistake. I believe he would have killed me eventually had I not managed to escape from his captivity. Olivia reached across the table and held her father's hand, even though it didn't seem like he needed comforting. The lack of shock in her and most of the other guests' eyes told Martha that they'd heard this tale before. Only her sister had not, and the sadness in Amanda's copper gaze was palpable. Her own life affected by demon kind. She empathised with the Empire Director, deeply and fully. After my ordeal, I was very wary, Maxwell continued. I didn't know if I should persist with my studies or not. But if I can be honest, I feared the repercussions if I did, having barely survived that encounter with the servant that held me captive. It's understandable, Martha said. Her own terrible ordeal had made her feel the same, ready to give up, lost, in search of purpose, but not entirely sure what that purpose should be. I was all but ready to quit, but then I met your father. You met Gadriel in person? She asked, surprised. I did, Maxwell nodded, smiling as if it were a fond memory. He confessed that it was he who enabled my escape from the clutches of the servant who abducted me, having become aware of my plight during one of his many visits to the area. I was of course shocked, but grateful that he'd gone out of his way to protect me like that. He hadn't needed to. You see, he wasn't seeking me out at the time. Rather, he visited Marytown during that period because there was a young woman who he had developed a personal interest in. The implication in the cadence of his voice was not lost upon Martha. She knew precisely who Gadriel had crept into Marytown to see during those years, because that particular woman had gone on to give her love, support, and ice cream whenever she was hurt. Acknowledging this, she smiled and replied, yes, there was. He told me that he wasn't meant to be here, Maxwell continued to regale his story, explained the reasons why. He then told me he respected what I was trying to achieve by uncovering the secrets of Marytown's dark history and the family behind it. And with absolutely no attempts to make me trust him, he told me all of the truths that I'd been seeking. He told me everything. So it seems, Martha said, though she was unsure why the male that she'd come to know by that name would do such a thing. Gadriel knew that he wasn't going to be able to stay in Marytown for an extended period of time, but he had a personal attachment that made him keep returning. It wasn't until a year after we'd met that he confided in me what that was. The man paused, probably for effect. There was going to be a child. His child. He'd intended for both the young woman that he loved and his offspring to leave with him when it was born, but something happened that he couldn't have foreseen. Isn't that correct, Miss Valentine? That is correct, she confirmed. And then because he seemed to be waiting for her to elaborate, she swallowed her pride and she added, the child was born female, not male as was custom. It was Amanda who asked her, why would that matter? Martha gazed at her sister, seeing that she was too enraptured by the story She too was enraptured by the story that was being told, but that she also understood all the implications being made and her own connection to them. Martha reached out and took her hand once more and tried to explain as best as she could. If the child had been born male, Gadriel could have taken it and the woman he loved to live with him in a place called the Mount. It would have been expected, part of their custom. There the child would have been trained from birth to battle the demons in a vast variety of ways, and their mother would have been revered for her contribution to the race. She would have been given status, allowed to live amongst their kind in safety for life. The same look crossed Amanda's face as she was certain had crossed her own when she'd been told of the ancient customs that had affected her own life. Confusion and happiness. Martha gave her hand a small squeeze of support and continued. That the child was born a girl was unprecedented. There had never been a female Nephilim born before, and the presence of one born in a place where Gadriel wasn't supposed to be was considered and ruled to be living, breathing evidence of his crime. I don't understand, Amanda continued to frown. What did he do that was so wrong that it was considered a crime? When he visited the young woman that he grew to love, he'd repeatedly ignored an important treaty that had been put in place to prevent war between the Nephilim and demons from spilling out in the area again, like it did over 200 years ago. The wildfires, she said, her eyes going wide. Yes, Martha smiled, impressed by her sister's knowledge of the area she lived in. Amongst Gadriel's kind, what happened over that period is known as the Purge. It was a final desperate act of the Nephilim race to stop the demons from completely claiming this land and enslaving all of the humans who lived here. From what little I've been told, it was awful. Not a burden that any of them took lightly. Many people died, but the town was liberated. And then the pact was put into place to assure that it never ever happened again. I see, Amanda nodded. Nervously she added, and you were that child that Gadriel fathered. That was you, wasn't it? It was. My father was not your father. Gadriel is your father. Martha confirmed her statement by telling her, our mother met Gadriel when she was 17. They courted in secret for a few years, and they fell in love. Having me was not planned. She couldn't help but wryly smile. I was a metaphorical smoking gun, Amanda. Gadriel denounced my birth because it would have caused the demons to attack the town if he acknowledged me. Many people would have died again, many innocent people. And even though he now claims that he didn't want to, he left me and Gale and Marytown behind, for what should have been forever. I wasn't ever meant to find out the truth about them or the demons. Any of it. After what seemed like a long minute, her sister looked down at the table and simply said, oh, I see now. I'm sorry, Martha told her genuinely. This is not how I wanted you to find out about any of that. I should have told you this myself. Is that why you left where you did? Amanda asked, astutely putting all the things together that she knew about her sister's life. You went to be with your real family. Amanda, you are my real family, Martha assured her, looking directly into her emotionally filled eyes. You and Gale, and yes, even your dad, as much as we didn't get along. I didn't have much of a choice to go when and how I did, and I never intended to leave you all behind like that. But, as you may have gathered, my presence in Marytown was a problem, even after Gadriel denounced me. Eventually it became known who I was, that I existed, and some very bad people were sent after me to try and prove my heritage. And she debated how much she could and should share with her sister about the events surrounding her disappearance. In the end, she opted to keep it as simple as she could, knowing that the only other person at the table who knew the whole truth would keep her confidence. I had to leave, Amanda. And then I had to stay on. But you did come back, her sister pointed out. You came back this week, even though you say that you shouldn't have, and you probably shouldn't even be here. You are here. Because of me. Of course, she said softly. And I would do this week 1,000,000 times over if you needed me to. Please don't be upset about this, Amanda. It changes nothing between us. You're my sister, and I'm yours. That's a fact, and that will never change. Taking a deep breath, she added, I love you. More than anybody else in this whole world. That's why I came back. Because you needed me. And you are my sister. I couldn't bear to sense you being in so much pain. After another long moment, Amanda nodded and said, Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make this all about me. It's a lot to take in. She kept nodding and then smiled. And I love you too. Martha moved out of her seat enough to wrap her arms around her sister and give her one hell of a cuddle. It seemed to take the younger girl by surprise, but she hugged her back, apologising over and over again for getting all sloppy and emotional and stuff. It was Peter Maxwell who stepped in to assure her, "You have no reason to apologise, Miss Ford, to anybody who's sitting here." Martha had turned her attention back to him, wanting to understand what the point of his story had been. She couldn't deny that she was feeling a little bit less sociable now he had, however unintentionally, upset her sister. She wanted him to get to the point so she could decide whether or not she'd be staying to eat her damn meal. Speaking very directly, she said, "I assume you have a reason for bringing up Gadriel. Can we hurry up and get to it now, please?" "I apologise for my lack of tact," he said, bowing his head enough to make Martha believe that he hadn't intended to cause any upset at all. "The reason I wished to talk to you about my experience with your father was because of how our physical meetings came to an end. The last time I saw Gadriel in person, he made me an offer. He told me that should I wish to continue to investigate the demons and other paranormal entities that were attracted to our town, he would grant me his protection in exchange for vital information." "You're a spy," Martha realised, unable to mask her surprise. "Of a sort," he admitted, a certain amount of pride settling in his shoulders. "As Gadriel is kind of not meant to enter Marytown, he enlisted my help to keep an eye on things for him, so he knew that you and your mother would be as safe as you could be given the circumstances and the location in which he left you in. He was the reason I formed the Marytown Paranormal Investigation Agency, and why, for 30 years, I've repaid his kindness with loyalty. I don't know what to say to any of this." "There's no need for you to comment upon the past," he said, waving it away with a waft of his hand, as if it were all that simple. "The reason I wanted to meet you tonight is to make you an offer. I've no idea if you're planning to remain in Marytown now that your family is safe, but I've heard some rumblings that some of your allies may have moved into the area and are planning to stay nearby, at least for the time being. Standing force on the border?" Maxwell was hedging, and Martha fought the urge to glare at Parker because it was painfully obvious that he was the only one who could have shared the illicit information that Stefan and his brothers were taking the border, in what sounded suspiciously like her mentor's own words. If it had come down from higher ups, then she would forgive him, but right then she suspected that Stefan had been right in not taking her at her word, that her former boyfriend could be completely trusted with Nephilim secrets and battle strategies, and that was a mistake that she would not make again. To Maxwell she said, "I don't feel comfortable discussing that." "Of course," he nodded. "Regardless, my offer remains the same as it always would have. You've shown my best investigators that you're a force to be reckoned with, Martha Valentine. Each one of them has come to me of their own accord over the past 2 days and insisted that you'd be an undeniable asset to the Empire team. And I have to admit, I'm inclined to agree with them." "I'm flattered," she said, gazing around the table at all the faces there. It was so overwhelming to think that they believed her to be worthy of working alongside them, when they were all so incredibly talented in their own rights. "Truly I am." It was Parker that inferred her hesitation. "But I don't know what I'm going to be doing." She reached over and took hold of her sister's hand, assuring her, "I know that I want to be here, at least for a while longer. I want to spend the time with Amanda and get to know her again. Everybody keeps telling me what a wonderful woman she's become. I'd like to spend some time with her myself to see that, to reconnect with my sister." Her sister blushed, glanced down. "I would like that too. I'm not going to deny that a big part of me has enjoyed working with you all, but I'm going to need some time to adjust and get used to being back here before I commit myself to anything." "We understand," Maxwell said. "The offer will remain open regardless." She nodded and was thankfully spared from having to make more comments as their food began to arrive and conversation quickly evolved into how good everything looked and smelled and tasted. Everybody got along so well, and for the first time Martha didn't feel like she was excluded from the group, the in crowd. She had the potential to have something wonderful here, something she'd been denied all those years ago when she'd been cruelly abducted from Marytown Park, and she was about to forge a new life for herself, outside of the shadow of her childhood. She gazed around at all of the people who worked at Empire and knew that she meant that what she'd told them. She enjoyed working and fighting alongside them, and while she'd never contemplated doing anything even remotely resembling becoming a paranormal investigator, she knew she'd be good at it. And more than that, she cared about these people. She'd made some new friends, reconnected with a very old one, and she had a sister who she wanted to love with all her heart, right there in Marytown. There was a new life waiting for Martha, an opportunity she'd be a fool not to try and take, but for some reason it felt like an ending as much as it did a start. Her heart was still being torn in two, despite having everything that she could possibly ever have longed for. Taking Peter Maxwell's offer would be a wonderful thing. So then why did it feel like she'd be saying goodbye? Chapter 30. 2 days later, Martha was alone, walking along a stretch of road that she'd walked before. Her heart didn't feel any less conflicted than it had the last time she walked it. But in her head she knew that she'd made the right choice this time. If only it still didn't feel like an utter betrayal to everything that she'd come to know. Just before noon, the Blackthorn Arms stood open for business as usual. Taking a deep breath of courage, she pushed open the glass-stained door and stepped inside, crinkling up her nose at the smell of ale and polished wood. The scent would surely dissipate throughout the day, as it had likely only just been cleaned, but it was not a welcoming smell, and it made her stomach knot. Or that could have just been her nerves. The male that she'd come to meet was over in a booth to the right-hand side against the back wall. It made her smile to see that he'd strategically positioned himself to have a clear view of every one of the entrances and areas where members of the public may lurk. Always on the clock, always wary. He didn't stand to meet her arrival, of which she was glad. At almost 7 feet tall, Stephen North was not exactly a person who could go unnoticed, and she was not there to cause a scene. Well, not intentionally anyway. She took a seat opposite him, putting her back to everything that he was watching because she knew that she could. He was alert enough and would never let anything sneak up on her. She trusted him, with her life, implicitly and unwaveringly. "You took longer than I thought," he commented. And she knew he was not referring to her punctuality for their scheduled meeting, but the length of time that had passed since she slew the demon on her parents' driveway, and he had come to clear up the mess. "I've been spending time with my sister," she told him. "She's feeling much better now, thanks for asking. A little bit emotional, but that's to be expected after everything she's been through. I'm glad she suffers no longer." As much as she wanted to snap at him again, Martha knew that his words were sincere. When it came to a matter of family, Nephilim did not offer falsehoods, nor did they placate. The race took those bonds very seriously, because the family was essentially all they had. If Stephen claimed to be glad that Amanda was feeling better, then he was simply glad that Amanda was feeling better. It was not the leader of Marytown's elite warrior guard who'd come to the meeting with a defensive chip on his shoulder. Martha knew that. "She misses Gail," she told him. "We both do. There'll be an opportunity to see your mother soon." "I know," she said, trying not to sound too disheartened. "I can't believe she's chosen to stay on the Mount. I've never thought that that could happen, let alone become a reality. She's been reunited with the male that she loves," he stated, matter of fact, almost as if he was talking about anybody. It was not personal for him. After spending so many days with her human sister, Martha was simply finding the nature jarring, which she inevitably hated. She knew Stephen, probably better than she knew anybody. He was the same male that he'd always been in all of his stoic ways, the male who she'd spent a decade in the company of, the male who she'd formed a very close bond with. "From what I hear, they're very happy," he added. "And as your mother, Gail has finally been welcomed, and given the station that she should have always had. This is a good thing, Martha." She hoped so. Truly she did. Just felt very strange to think of the woman she remembered being raised and loved by, together with the male that she'd come to know and mildly resented as her true biological father. Even though she knew of their history, knew that she was the living embodiment of the love that they'd once shared, she never in a million years expected that one day they might reunite, and that it would have been her that had brought them together. "I suppose you have new orders for me," Martha stated, wanting to stop talking about her personal affairs so they could get down to the business of why she'd called the meeting. "I have," Stephen nodded, sternly reverting to his professional role without so much as a pause. "You are to remain in Marytown." "That much I already know," she said, trying desperately not to act as stubborn and uncomfortable as she felt. The reality was she'd decided that with her father and Stephen's blessing or not, she was going to stay and be with her sister. Make Marytown a place that was worthy of being considered her home once again. Yes, Stefan stated. She couldn't tell if he was happy or not about it. He was keeping his own emotions locked up tight, impenetrable. Not unusual, but she kind of wished that he would give her some inkling that this meeting was as difficult for him as it was for her. It was never going to happen, though. Not with this Mel. Our fathers had granted you the freedom to live within the boundaries and conduct your evaluation of the area known as Marytown. You were to focus on finding evidence of demonic activity, but they do not mind if during your evaluations you assist your human friends at Empire in their various investigations. Gadriel seemed rather pleased with the notion. He approves of you being here and hopes that you'll thrive in your new role. I'm sure he does, she replied, sounding exactly how she felt. You're being entrusted with a great honour, Martha Valentine. I know, she said, feeling proud but surprisingly emotional. Marytown will be liberated, and you'll be standing right there in the thick of it when that day finally comes. He paused, smiled wildly. I have to admit I am envious, as well as proud, of course. I couldn't have got this far without you. He didn't acknowledge that compliment, but of course he never would. They both knew that every little thing that he'd done for her since the day he'd pulled her out of that hellhole that she'd been in. There was no need to get into specifics. They had never kept score. They had been unequal at the beginning, a young, broken, human-born girl and the strong, stalwart Nephilim that had saved her from the monsters. But they'd eventually become comrades, partners. Perhaps they'd even become friends. Their bond had flourished, become more. It was hard to put into words. Nothing had ever seemed appropriate. So that's it, Martha asked, staring hard at the dark wood table that lay between them, not risking looking up at him. That is it, Stefan confirmed. You already have everything that you need, and you are to report to me if you require anything, or find something that you believe we should act upon. You are ready for this. Martha sat there for a long time in silence before finally saying what had been running through her head, hanging on the edge of her tongue, even though she knew Stefan wouldn't particularly appreciate it. She needed to put it out there. I'm going to miss you. I will not be far away, he stated tactfully. I am to be stationed here, across the border. You only have to call if you need me. She shook her head. It won't be the same. No, it will not, he agreed, which surprised her. But you're going to be brilliant, Martha Valentine. I know that now as I've always known it. You are ready for this. And I am never wrong. No, he wasn't. Resigned to her fate, Martha got to her feet and continued to avoid making eye contact, because hers were filling with far too many emotions, and his never ever would. Because he was the ultimate professional, the mission always came ahead of his personal feelings. As Martha walked away from Stefan, she thought she heard him mutter something that sounded an awful lot like "take care," but she didn't stop to clarify it. Her new life awaited her beyond the border, and in that town that she'd been raised by a family who mostly meant the world to her. A town where her life could begin anew. Home. What a sentimental concept. Fortunately, Martha Valentine had a lot to be sentimental about. Okay, that's it. The end? Question mark. It's definitely not the end, I can assure you, and I'm going to go into that in just a moment. That is it. That is Sins of the Father in its entirety, and it's done. It has been incredible to be able to read this book again. Haven't gone through it for a good while, and to read it out loud and to share it has been really, really incredible. So thank you so much for watching this little series and for supporting me and everything like that. But as I said, it is not over yet. I am going to be continuing with this series because there is more. There is a lot more. It doesn't end there. I need a few days to get myself all sorted and organised out, but I will be moving on because there is a sequel. There's a follow-up book that has been published. It was published like a year or so ago, but it got pulled because it wasn't quite up to scratch. I wasn't happy about it, and it's in the process of being edited again, and I need to work through it and get it ready and get it back up there. And it is big. A lot of the feedback that I got from it originally was that it was quite big, and I'm going to show you right now how big that it actually is, because this heavy lump, this is the paperback, and you can see it is pretty enormous. I'll show you the cover. It's called Art of War. Going off feedback that I got from it, I decided to split it down the middle, find a natural part to put it into 2 parts, and so it now appears like this, in 2 parts. And we are going to be moving on to this one next, Art of War Part 1, subtitled Hell Hath No Fury. Yeah, so you give me a few days to get myself all organised, and I will be reading that. I'll be carrying on and reading that. It will be 1 chapter at a time with that book, because it is a lot bigger, and it will probably take quite a while to get through each chapter. But yeah, this was Sins of the Father, which was the first book. I hope that you enjoyed it. It was a long time coming, this book, to get it into the state that it is currently in, and it means an awful lot to me. If you want to support me, the book is available to buy. You can get it on Amazon, and you can buy the paperback version. I think it's £5.99 in the UK, and it's $9.99 on Amazon.com. It's available in plenty of countries worldwide. If that's too expensive, I know that it's a difficult time at the moment. You can get the Kindle version, which you can get on Kindle, or for the Kindle app on any smartphone or laptop or all like that, and that's only 99p or 99 cents in America, and that's the digital version of it, which is much cheaper. Or it's on Kindle Unlimited for free if you got Kindle Unlimited or anything like that. If you enjoyed the book, enjoyed reading it, I would appreciate it. You don't have to. I'm not going to force anybody to buy the book. But yeah, if you want to support me, then that is how to do it. Yes, I am going to be carrying on with this series. We're going to be moving on to Art of War, Part 1, Hell Hath No Fury. Once I get myself organised, it will probably be a few days. But I'll set it all up, I'll schedule it, so it'll be a premiere like this video has been on YouTube when I get into it with the first chapter. And I'll be letting you know, and we can carry on with all of this. If you have any questions about Sins of the Father, about my writing processes or any of that, don't hesitate to let me know. I would like to in future do some videos talking about my writing processes, how that book came to be, and all of the changes that happened to it over the sort of 10 years. It took me like 10 years to playing around in that world to get to the stage where I had a story that I was happy to put out there into the world. So if you have any questions and stuff, leave them in the comments to this video, either in the live comments or the following on comments. Or you can find me on Twitter. My author is at Lucie J Mansell, Lucie J Mansell, Mansell. I also have a Facebook page, Lucie J Mansell. I'm on Instagram as well, but I don't really use that much. I kind of got out of the habit of that, and that's something that I need to try and get the habit back into. And I'm going to be putting writing stuff up here on this YouTube channel as much as I can. So thank you so much for joining me for this video today. It's been a long video. Thank you for all of the support. Thank you for listening to Sins of the Father. And I will let you know when I'm going to be carrying on with the next book, with Art of War. So yes, as always, mwah, take care of yourselves and everyone that you love in these difficult times. Thank you very much for watching.